If you're watching this video, then you likely fall into one of three categories. One, you are unable to consistently generate new customers for your business. Number two, you've worked with countless agencies and or coaches, yet you don't have a system that consistently generates new clients. Or number three, your profit margins are decreasing, your cost per acquisition is going up, and you don't have the ability to continue to scale. Don't worry, in this video, I'm going to break down exactly why your marketing continues to fail you, why you are struggling to scale up your business, and the exact systems we've implemented in our business over the last 2 years that have allowed us to create a compounding flywheel that consistently generates new customers while decreasing our cost per acquisition, shortening our sales cycle, and ultimately increasing our profit margin. Now, you may be wondering, who is this guy? My name's Zach Williams. I'm one of the co-founders of Conversionly, and over the last 6 years, we've been deemed as the architects of client acquisition. We have scaled 3 of our own companies to over $1 million a year, and we've taken Conversionly to a $20 million company. We've also helped over 2,900 clients build 7- and 8-figure companies. Clients like Jake Sutherland, who's scaled to 30 million, Matt Treese, who scaled to $6.3 million company, AJ Asmar with a $3 million company, Rick Pino with a $2 million company, Peter McCaslin, $1.5 million, Dan Rawich, $1.2 million, etc. We've got thousands more. Feel free to check out our YouTube and the countless case studies we have on there that break down all the client success stories that we've had. However, all that aside, I'm going to break down my research and everything that I've studied over the last 2 years to answer one simple question. What is the single best way to generate a customer without having to compete on prices or using these cheesy guarantees that don't ever actually work while operating in an AI-driven society? With that said, I have 3 requirements that have to be met in answering that question. Along that journey, as you can see here, June of 2023, all the way up through July today when this video is being recorded, I have spent over $5.5 million testing every single funnel that you could possibly think of. Everything from webinar funnels, VSL funnels, LTO funnels, community funnels, video gate funnels, IGDM funnels, short form funnels, all the funnels that you can think of, we have tested. And I ultimately wanted to know, how can I sustainably generate new customers in a way that's going to work from now to 2030, 2035, and keep up with the AI innovation and the competition that's entering the market. Number 2, how can I do this efficiently? How can I do it in a way that works for me and my business, where I don't have to constantly be pumping out ads every single day, where I don't have to constantly be recording content to post on YouTube, or I don't have to sell myself to try to get a sale? And number 3, it has to be able to be managed by one person. Not only am I on this conquest to solve this problem for myself, I also want to bring the best results for our clients. As I noted, we are the architects of client acquisition, so the sole focus of everything that we build, we then build for our client. Over this video, I'm going to break down all the data and research that I have come to the conclusion of figuring out why marketing isn't working and what you actually need to do to make sure that it performs for your business. Stick around to the end, and I'm going to show you the exact system that we have implemented that has helped us decrease our cost per acquisition by 67% while shortening our sales cycle down to just 15 days. All right, on the first step of my research and in my study was going and looking at what we're currently doing and studying why we are still doing it. So most businesses that I see and have found, everything from clients that we've worked with currently and in the past, everything that marketing agencies or other coaches are running, what consultants are doing from Google, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, whatever advertising source or medium, how are they generating customers and what does their funnel process look like? And virtually every single funnel runs with an ad that drives traffic to a lead magnet. And that lead magnet has the objective of ultimately capturing name, email, and phone number. That is pretty standard across the board for every business. However, from there, you have slight deviations in the funnel, but it remains pretty consistent. You could have traffic that then goes to a VSL, that VSL then goes to an application, and that application then goes to scheduling an appointment. Overall, the consensus is generate a lead, show them some information, qualify them, and then set an appointment. Then from that appointment, we want to get them to a sales call. And virtually every system, and if you don't have this in your system, especially in 2025, you are getting totally left behind. You need to have a nurture process, SMS, dialers, setters following up, and email on the back end. That is ultimately to drive people that did not convert through the funnel to a scheduled appointment. This is consistently across the board the same funnel that most people are running. And in Our over 2,900 clients, I looked at our data over the last 5 years. What is our average cost per lead for coaches and consultants? That's typically who we work with, and that is our specialty. And overall, cost per lead is about $40 to $60 cost per lead. Now, you could generate cheaper leads, you can generate more expensive leads. But overall, the average is $40 to $60, and that covers an array of agencies, coaches, and consultants that we've worked with, everything from HR recruitment, fitness coaches, business development coaches. We've worked with thousands of marketing agencies to help them build their own client acquisition, etc. And across the board, $40 to $60 cost per lead. Now, what's interesting is the overall conversion rate from lead to show, not just lead to appointment. Lead to appointment, we're consistently getting about 38 to 42% lead conversion rates into booked appointments. But the total percentage of leads that actually show up to a sales call is averaging about 18%. That's our standards, that is our metrics, and I know we beat out our competition 9 times out of 10. So with that said, 18 appointments are averaging about $222 an appointment to $333 cost per shown appointment, not cost per schedule. Cost per schedule, we're down into the $120. So cost per show, we're $220 to $330. Now, statistically speaking, close rates are 10 to 15%. That is what you are traditionally seeing with a direct response marketing funnel. And in these metrics, in these numbers, in this example of 100 leads, you're only generating about 2 to 3 sales. So your cost per acquisition is averaging $1,300 to $3,000. Now, this is the biggest problem, and it is the reason that sent us on this conquest. If your cost per acquisition is in this range and you're selling a product, a high ticket service that's $5,000 to $8,000, then that means after you pay sales commission, which if you don't have a salesperson, you need to budget that in so you have margin for it. But after you pay sales commission, your ad spend to acquire the sale, and then your fulfillment cost, you're really left with about a $300 to $700 profit. Now, that's not acceptable because a $300 to $700 profit is not scalable. You'd have to sell 10 people just to make $3 to $7 grand. So from that, you need to be able to create scalability and you need to have higher profit margins. Coaches and consultants should, statistically saying, should be in that 40 to 60% profit margin range for a good operational business. Now, if you're scaling and you're adding more done-for-you services, that would be a little bit less, but that's the general range. And that's just not what's happening in today's day and age. And I went on this conquest to identify what is causing this to happen. And that's really where we come with problem number 1. There's only 3 to 4 touch points along this customer journey. So if we look at it, we have an ad, that's touch point number 1. You have a funnel, which is touch point number 2. You have a nurture sequence, which is touch point number 3, and then your sales call, which is touch point number 4. Now, as I'm going through this and looking, what is the most optimum amount of touch points? How do you communicate to your audience in those touch points? And how much should they actually consume? Now, I've seen a lot of different research where people are breaking down the 7-11-4 rule. That was one big thing that I consistently came to. And I'm a person of data. I don't just take what someone tells me as fact. I go and research it. And many people were saying, oh, Google invented this 7-11-4 rule. Sorry, that's not true. Every single place I search, from ChatGPT to Claude to Perplexity to searching on Google, searching Think with Google, Google never developed a study to show proof of a 7-11-4 rule. However, they did develop ZMA, which is the zero moment of truth. And what that ultimately is a study that they conducted back in 2011, and it identifies that there needs to be 11 touch points along the customer journey. Now that jumped. So in 2010, when they started their research, and then 2011, when they concluded it, the average number of touch points went from 5.2 to 10.8 touch points. And that's what they ultimately wrote their book, Zero Moment of Truth, around. Now, that 11 touch points, it makes sense. If you think about whenever you are looking at something, you're consuming something, or you are looking to buy something, rather, you are going to read reviews. You're going to probably watch some YouTube videos on it, see how it works. You're going to look at different people that offer the product, etc. We'll get into that in a little bit more. However, 11 touch points is reasonable. Access to information is almost instantaneous now. And back in the day, that was not necessarily possible. Therefore, people only had 5.2 touch points. But now that you have social media, you have the search engine everywhere, and even worse, now in 2025, 14 years after they did this research, you actually have considerable more touch points and more searches that are happening because of how easy ChatGPT, Claude, and Perplexity make it for customers to collect information. But really, I wanted to know that 7-11-4 rule, it sounded catchy. I read a lot of good documentation on it, and it made sense. It clicked for me, but I wanted to know who actually created that study. And that is when I found Daniel Priestley, I believe is his name, wrote the book called Oversubscribed. And it's how to consistently get people to subscribe to you, subscribe to your belief, and buy your business. Now, this predominantly focuses on SaaS companies, but if you read the book, it is very detailed in identifying that the 0 moment of truth, the 11 touch points, is something that needs to happen. However, someone can't just consume, 20 minutes worth of content over 11 touch points and they've made up their mind. Think about the last time you bought a vehicle. You probably spent several hours researching what's the safety rating, what's the color schemes, what's the interior like, what's the blah, 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 right? That is where the 7 hours of content comes into play. Daniel, in his book, identified that the average consumer who's making a considerable purchase, typically high ticket, is going to consume or research for at least 7 hours before they are in that 0 moment of truth, the ability to make the decision on purchasing. And they do that typically across 4 mediums. I don't just go to someone and say, hey, who do I buy this from? And that's instantly what I purchase from. I get feedback, read reviews, look at content, look at information that then helps further validate what I have been told. So that identifies the problem with this linear marketing approach that I see all agencies, all coaches running in their funnels. They are trying to take someone from an ad to a sales call and still expecting a high ticket close. But I asked myself, why did this work? Why did this work in 2020 versus today? And that's where we get into the next 2 problems, okay? One, less than 5% of the market is ready to make a buying decision. So 95% of people aren't even getting marketed to in this system because it only applies to people who are actually ready to make a decision, right? If I go back into 2020, I started asking myself, it wasn't this hard to get sales, right? We got performance for our clients left and right. It was easy. But things have progressively gotten more difficult, and I wanted to understand why. And it comes down to the simple fact that competition has increased over 40% in the last 5 years. If you look at Google's studies on cost per click rates consistently year over year, they are seeing market dominance decrease by 33%. HubSpot is reporting that cost per acquisition costs are increasing by 18%. If you look at Facebook and think about the last time you clicked on an ad, you then went and saw 20 other ads from other companies or competitors just like it. And it's because you have this little system right here in Facebook ads for showing your ads alongside other competitors. Then you can actually check this off. Go ahead and check it off and watch your CPMs double almost overnight. So you pretty much have to have this selected, which then gets you put next to all your competitors every time someone sees your ad. So if I'm trying to take a consumer from ad to closed in one flow linear process, it's never going to happen because my customer, my prospect, is going to end up seeing 20 other people. They're probably going to go through their funnels and book calls with at least 3 of them. Now it's me versus 3 other people. And anytime you get in a multi-call situation like that, now you're competing on features, benefits, and price. That's it. And that's why you are consistently seeing objections on your sales calls. Well, I want to see an exact case study of someone that looked just like me. Or I want to know what you're going to guarantee me. Or, hey, let me think about it. And then they end up ghosting you for 3 months and you lost the sale. It always comes down to this, and 90% of decisions are made based off of the price point alone. So how do you overcome this? We'll get into that in just a second. What is the cause and effect of this? You end up having a 22% decrease in your conversion rate. Your overall throughput of your funnel decreases by 22%. Your sales cycle is now doubling, if not quadrupling, and taking considerably longer to close people. And last but not least, as HubSpot reported in their state of marketing address, cost per acquisition costs are increasing 18% year over year. However, if you look at the coaching and consulting industry explicitly, it's actually closer to 37 to 38%. Because if you look at the rise and the growth of the coaching and consulting industry, that market is substantially growing year over year. Back in 2020, it consisted of about 37 coaches and consultants. Now today it's up over 100,000. So there is a considerable increase in the number of people that are operating those businesses, and you're competing against every single one of them. So this cost per acquisition, this is looking at all industries from the HubSpot State of Market report. However, realistically, if you look at just coaches and consultants that you're competing against, you're looking closer to 40% year over year increase in cost per acquisition. And this is what started that conquest for me of testing all the different funnels. And I'm talking millions, $5.5 million in 2 years on ads trying to figure this problem out. The first place I started was a webinar funnel. That's actually a lie. First place I started was a VSL funnel, but that's something we had already run for several years, so I already had all the data on it, so I didn't start my test there. I started with a webinar funnel, and I wanted to see, okay, if I need someone to consume more information, right? The 7-11-4 rule says 7 hours of content, 11 touch points, 4 different mediums. So I tried to architect that within a webinar funnel and design it to get success. And we did succeed with this. However, there's a problem with this. It didn't check my 3 benchmarks. It needs to be sustainable. That means it needs to consistently work for 2025 through 2030 and work as AI is going to consistently take over the market. Additionally, it is a complex system. It's arguably one of the most complex funnels that you can build because you have payment processors linked in it, you have several redirects, you have upsells, downsells, and several different points of friction that you have to optimize for, yet you have an event that is sometime in the future that you are optimizing for, so you don't have a big window to optimize all those friction points. Therefore, this is not something that's manageable by one person. Therefore, it did not pass the checkpoints. Next was an LTO funnel. From an LTO funnel, the fundamental aspect of an LTO made a lot of sense to us. Low ticket offer, it gives them ability to buy something from us, get them to experience what it's like to work with us, our expertise, our authority, and we get to transact with them, so that decreases our cost per lead. We are generating $40 to $60 cost per lead. If I can get them to buy something for $10 to $30, then I can cut that in half. That's the thought process. So you send traffic to a sales page, you get an order bump that increases that. Then you have an OTO that sells them a one-time offer. You could have another OTO. We tested it with 1 or 2, etc. And then if they don't take it, then you can get the downsell. People that do take the OTO, you're then trying to get them into the booked appointment. But here's the problem. I'm trying to go for the appointment right here. However, they haven't even consumed the LTO. And statistically speaking, 83% of people that buy an LTO don't even consume the whole thing. So it's not achieving what I wanted it to achieve. Yeah, I'm generating a cheaper lead, but now my sales cycle is 6 months plus because this person was not ready to buy a high ticket thing. So the LTO funnel didn't meet our checkpoints. Lastly, we tried a community funnel. This isn't the last funnel we tested, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But a community funnel to hit on the 7-11-4. It made logical sense. If I can get them into our environment, our ecosystem, if you will, and get them consuming our information, that will hit us on the 7 hours of content. We can get 11 different touch points between different types of content, driving them to different places, and naturally bring them into a book call. And this is by far, hands down, the closest thing to success that I can actually see for a business consistently. However, it is very time intensive to run a good, strong community funnel because the true value here isn't just the information that you're sharing, right? You can have courses, you can have lessons, but across the board, unless you're in an extremely high problem awareness audience, they're likely not going to consume this. And I've proven this myself. I had a lot of communities I was interested in. I joined those communities, and I honestly say I can't been in those communities since the day I joined them. Therefore, this did not hit the check mark. So I started asking myself, how do I fix this? And that's when I ventured into the IGDM funnels. I looked at Instagram and taking Instagram as a portfolio, right? Treating my Instagram as if it is a showcase of my work, of my case studies, my success, and my authority. However, along that conquest, yeah, I was able to generate cheaper leads. I got DMs for $4 to $6, except I'm wasting all my time and effort, or my setter was actually, chasing down these people that are low quality tire kickers, and 9 times out of 10 weren't even a good fit or the right audience we were trying to bring in. Therefore, it doesn't meet the checks and balances. So at this point, I am losing my ever-loving mind, because here I am. At this point, I think we've invested $2.8 to $2.9 million into testing, and we generated sales from them. Don't get me wrong. Different funnels we produced, we were able to get sales, but it wasn't sustainable. It was not sustainable. It will not stay up to date and keep up with AI. So if I make an investment into something today, how long is it going to continue to produce for me? That's one of the biggest things that I think about in terms of, is this a good system to implement? Because if it only solves the problem for now through the next 3 to 6 months, is it worth my time investment in building that? And that is the problem that I see with most systems, is the time investment that it takes to get a system operational to where it's actually profitable. It ends up expiring before that timeline is done. So I needed something sustainable. I needed something that one person can manage. And 3, it needs to be efficient. It needs to be something that works for me, not against me. I don't want to be recording ads all the time. I don't want to be constantly pushing out content. So that leads me into the RBC squared framework. This is where Justin and I sat down and we broke down. We know that we need to have the 7-11-4 rule, right? I need people to consume YouTube. I need people to consume my ads. I need people to consume my funnel. But what realistically happens in this? And I went back and reread Breakthrough Advertising by Eugene Schwartz. And if you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. He talks about the 5 phases of market awareness. And it's the same thing. You've probably heard this before. You have AIDA, awareness, interest, desire, action. You have this broken down into different frameworks. But ultimately, it comes down into the prospect that is problem aware will go problem aware, solution aware, product aware, most aware. Now, let me break this down for you in an example. When I bought my SUV, I was going through and I had a list. One of my biggest requirements was it needs to be family oriented, so I need to be able to transport my family. 2, it must be fast. I want to be able to get in it, hammer on the gas, and like you can feel that throwback, right? You know what I'm talking about? So, and 3, it needed to look good, right? I wanted to be proud of what I was driving. So I had narrowed it down to 5 options. I can't even remember all 5, but I had the Lincoln Aviator, a Range Rover, an Audi RS Q8, the Lamborghini Huracan, or not Huracan, Urus, and I think it was the Porsche Macan, irrelevant. So I get all those options. At that point, I'm problem aware, right? I know what I want. And then now I'm going to solution awareness. I'm seeing what other solutions exist. Then I phase into product awareness, right? I start learning about the products and seeing, do they meet my needs and requirements? Range Rover quickly got off the list because it's a lemon. I think 1 out of every 3 Range Rovers that are sold within the first 10,000 miles ends up in a shop. Thanks, but no thanks. And the Lamborghini off the list. Financially, fiscally, it just doesn't make sense to spend $300,000 on an SUV. Didn't make sense. Stupid use of capital. So that easily went off the list. Now I'm left with the Porsche, the Lincoln Aviator, and the RS Q8. The decision for the product ultimately came down to what has the highest utility for a family. The Lincoln Aviator won that across the board. Okay, so now I am fully product aware. Now I go into most aware. And this is where I then select the dealership that I'm going to use when I buy that vehicle from. And this comes from, what is their reviews? What do people say about them? What warranties do they have? Do they have any special things that are provided? The Lincoln dealership where I ended up buying my vehicle from actually had the exact Aviator that I wanted in stock, so I got to go test drive it. 2, they had a process to where anytime that vehicle needed service, they would drive a Lincoln Aviator or Navigator out to me, leave it with me, take my car, service the car, bring my car back, and then take that car. I never had to touch the dealership. Wham bam, thank you ma'am, sold. Now, that is the same process that people are going to go through when they buy something. And that is exactly what Eugene Schwartz broke down in the 5 stages of market awareness. So knowing that and applying it into the marketing system has to work congruent of that for all of our systems. So this is where we started building out nurture systems beyond just your traditional SMS and email. We built in an ad nurture system. Now, everybody's talked about retargeting ads. Lead not booked, book not sold, right? That is something fundamental. If you're not retargeting, you should be. But how do you do it strategically to cover 100% of the customer journey, right? Like I said, most systems are only targeting 5% of people that are in a buying decision. I want to cover 100% of that sales cycle, and I want to own the customer journey. So how do I actually take ownership of that? And I hit people at every phase of that buying process. When they're problem aware, what are they searching through? So this is where I map out my customer journey and I identify what problems are they experiencing. They try to generate leads with LinkedIn prospecting and cold email. They tried running Facebook ads. They tried an agency. They tried this. They tried that. So now I'm building content that handles everybody that is problem aware, but they're trying to get to solution awareness. What is the best solution? Okay. And I'm educating them around that. And then I'm educating them on the product, which is our RBC squared framework is our unique mechanism, but our product is our infinity flywheel funnel. Okay. That is the process in which we do this. So I educate them on the product. That's what drives the conversion. Lastly, I try to get them to close. Now, how this happens, where we go R, relationship, B, bridge, C, convert, C, close. When someone goes through this, they have 3 main beliefs that we need to handle throughout our marketing consumption. They need to believe that the solution is the right solution for them. That is the bridge. Then they must believe that your solution is the right solution to deliver that solution. The third and final belief is they must believe that you are the company to deliver that product with the highest rate of success and the least amount of risk. Okay. And that's closing on the company. So by utilizing this with the RBC squared framework, we're able to deliver the right messaging throughout that process. And over the entire customer journey, we are building a relationship. I don't know about you, but I didn't go to the altar with my wife the day I met her. It took several years before we ended up getting there. And that is exactly what's happening in a sales process. You're not going to get somebody to opt in and then 2 days later, one call close, unless you have something that nurtures that entire customer journey. Next, we have YouTube nurturing. So what you see here in YouTube is a video of Justin. This is in incognito mode. And in this, YouTube naturally has a retargeting system already built in. Go to your YouTube channel, pick out one of your YouTube videos. If you have more than a handful of them, you're going to see the first 2 videos that show, or maybe it's the first and the 4th video, are going to be your videos. This is YouTube naturally retargeting the people that are watching this content, thinking the highest probability that they're going to watch something else is going to be the same person. So this face, and this face are all the same. Likelihood is that they're going to click. YouTube wants you to stay on platform. Now, this is getting into the weeds a little bit, but as you start studying your watch time ratings in your videos, and you see this is the average time that people are falling off of my videos, that's when you start creating your content till you inject a call to action that drives them to another video. This helps you achieve the 7-hour content rule. Okay. The next thing we want to do is SMS and email nurture, but not statistically in the way it's like, hey, come book a call, come book a call, come book a call. If I come through your funnel and I did not book a call myself, I have an objection. And you telling me via text, hey, come book a call is not going to handle that objection. What I need to do is actually establish a connection with you, build rapport, and then find out what were your objections, handle those objections before you're going to book a call. But realistically, in that process, I want to find a way to inject my content to hit on the 7-11-4 rule. That gets you to consume more of my content before you show up to that sales call. This is going to shorten my sales cycle and increase the propensity and the velocity of my funnel as you come through it. Lastly, we already had it built, so we ran our community nurture, right? We allowed people to come in through our LTOs, drive them into the system, and that gave us the ability. That was when really light bulbs went off in this process. Was this is the solution, is because it's modular. Once you have the core system in place, then you can start plugging in these other systems. One of the problems with webinar funnels, LTO funnels, community funnels is it requires a completely different sales process to take the prospect to a closed deal in a high ticket sale. So if you are trying to drive that conversion, that relationship, but you have to create a modified or custom sales process for every single strategy, that's not something you can sustainably scale on. However, we found once we implemented the Infinity Flywheel into our business, then we could create a modular system that plugs in LTOs, it plugs in the community funnel, it plugs in the webinar funnel. And naturally, those things can then feed through our core Infinity Flywheel that then drives through our standard sales process. So now I'm creating this flywheel effect, and I'll explain that here in just a second. So if we look at the performance, month one was the same, right? We didn't see anything different in the first month of running the system versus the first month without it, right? We're still getting a 40% schedule or 30% close. These rates are going up. These rates are increasing, but it's happening over time. It's not happening immediately. Our cost per appointment remained the same. Our cost per acquisition was relatively the same. But what we noticed was in month two, that's when things started to transition for us. That is where we are now able to reduce our cost per appointment, our cost per show, and our cost per acquisition decreased, right? $300 to $500 decrease in our cost per acquisition. This was a positive sign. Now, when I went into month three, that then changed absolutely everything. We went from 18 appointments to 38 appointments, right? That's a 20 appointment increase. Our cost per appointment was literally cut in half or more. Our cost per acquisition was a third of what it was. And the reason why is after looking at this, and it's why we call it the Infinity Flywheel, is you create a flywheel function. The problem with most linear funnels is you drive a lead into it, and then from there, they leave, right? They opt in, but they don't continue. They don't book. What are you doing to get them to take the next step? All you're really focusing on is SMS and email nurture to try to get them to go back through the funnel. And if they come in through YouTube and opt in, and then let's say they filled out an application, but they didn't continue to schedule, or they scheduled and then they no-showed, how are you bringing them back in? This is the core fundamental problem of what we are trying to address. The linear funnel only covers 30% of the sales process. Your marketing is only handling 30% of the sale. However, after you implement this system, now we are able to let marketing cover 70% of the sale because we're taking them through every phase of the customer journey. Now, from there, my sales team does not have as difficult of a time to convert a prospect. They already come to the call knowing who we are, knowing what we do, knowing how we do it, knowing who we do it for, knowing what our results are. So there's no ambiguity around all these different objections that we need to handle out. Our sales team can then close the gap on here's the specifics of what it's going to look like for you, for your explicit, specific business, and how we're going to help you scale. It creates a flywheel effect because instead of people just leaving, we have systems that bring them back through every phase of their buying journey. They're consistently consuming our content. They're coming back through our funnel. Even though they opted in once, they're going to opt in again. And then after they opt in that time, they might go on to book an appointment. It creates this cyclical effect where 1 month I try to bring people in. Then month two, I have the people that didn't convert from month one, and then the new people of month two coming in to the funnel. That's producing results. And then from there, month three, it just compounds. So that gives you a good, strong context of what I mean by the Infinity Flywheel and how we are infinitely trying to bring people into the funnel and we create a compounding effect. Now we have the ability to then tie in additional traffic sources into that system, and it creates a cyclical process where kind of like, remember school when they said no child left behind? It's kind of like no lead is left behind. We have our sales processes, we have our retargeting processes, we have this Infinity Flywheel that's consistently bringing people through their customer journey, building a relationship with us. So when they are in that buying decision, they end up moving forward with us. So what is comprised of the system? And this comes down into the 6 core elements that you need to make sure that the Infinity Funnel actually functions and works for you. First, everything operates on a core VSL funnel, okay? Out of all the funnels that we tested, a core VSL funnel is still the highest success funnel. Now, I have millions of dollars, 2,900 clients, and countless iterations to prove this. The VSL funnel is the fastest path to take someone to a qualified sales call. However, as we have seen, it's not effective in actually getting them to close when they get there. So the remaining pieces of the infinity funnel system to be able to effectively retarget, we must be able to feed the correct data back into Facebook, and our pixel must be strong. Those of you that have been in any type of advertising over the last 4 years have seen iOS 14 completely tanked pixels. So the performance of a pixel is no longer strong. And most CAPI systems are unsuccessful because pixels can be blocked if they're not a first-party pixel. So FPP, first-party pixel, you must have a first-party pixel and server-side tracking system put into place. What we did here, this took me roughly about 6 weeks to develop and implement into our business to where we're able to collect all pixel information, feed it back to Facebook, LinkedIn, Reddit, YouTube, Google, etc. That way we can have all customer information and make sure our retargeting audiences are strong. Next, we need to map our entire customer journey. So like I stated, you have beliefs that people are going to go through, but you also have trust indicators, things that they do or do not trust, things that are going to influence them, questions they're going to have, what are they psychologically going to be feeling, what emotional motivators are they going to have through the process. This is all going to determine what type of content are you creating and what messaging are you putting out there for your audience. Next, we bring in the RBC squared retargeting flywheel. This hits on every phase of the customer journey across every place digitally that you can advertise and retarget people effectively. So with that, we are building out retargeting systems, Facebook, Meta, LinkedIn. Meta is Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp and Messenger. But LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, Google, Display, AdRoll, etc. Everywhere that we can physically retarget somebody, we want to be retargeting, and then we're cultivating the message for the placement and the phase that they're in. So I'm not just throwing out ads, hey, you opted in, but you haven't booked a call. Why? I am actually figuring out, okay, they opted in, but didn't book a call. Why? That's the question mark I'm asking myself. And now I'm taking my customer journey mapping and I'm creating content that's going to handle those objections that prevented them from taking the next step. And I'm going to inject beliefs and cover doubts that they have throughout that journey. So when they go and do book a call, they are closer to the relationship with me, which gives me the ability to hit 4 different mediums, 7 hours of content, and 11 different touch points. Next, we need to have our flywheel content pillars. So in all aspects, you can get people that argue, should I create short form content or long form content? I don't think there's an answer into which you should do. I don't think it's one or the other. I think you just have what works for you and where your audience hangs out. With that said, you have content pillar pieces that are known objections that your audience is going to have that you must handle. And ideally, you're handling or creating content that fits on every different medium that handles that objection. So that gets brought in to the retargeting flywheel. Lastly, you have to have a sales attribution software. So most people are well aware of Hyros, Triple Whale, Commently, etc., that are attribution platforms that you can attribute the traffic sources. However, the downfall of all these systems that we have found is they are extremely expensive. Hyros, we were up to the point paying $2,200 a month for Hyros. That's absolutely redonkulous. So we developed our own system. It's called the Infinity OS. That gives us the ability to provide this as a solution for our clients in a low-cost format. That way we can track the entire customer journey. We can attribute what touch points did they have throughout the entire process. Where did they originate? Where was the last click? We can have a U-shaped attribution that shows us 40% on the front end, 40% on the back end, and 20% divided across the entire middle. You ultimately want to know where your customers are coming from and why they're coming from there, and be able to track that from a ROAS perspective of what's actually producing results. So that is the core elements of the Infinity Funnel system. Now, what are your options to actually implement and incorporate that into your business? One, I think it's very clear by now, agencies are not able to do this. Agencies and the problems with agencies, look, we've worked with at minimum 800 agencies to help them scale. And that was how Conversionly originally started. Both Justin and I ran marketing agencies. And the average lifespan of an agency client is 3 months. And the reason for that is because marketing and sales are disconnected. You cannot effectively build a client acquisition system by having marketing and sales not working in synergy together. And the problem with most agencies is they are implying or operating with tactical solutions without a strategic perspective. And most businesses lack the strategic knowledge, expertise, and ability to build the appropriate strategies for their business. And that's where you end up in this conundrum of, okay, I'm just going to run this $27 new patient special on Facebook because that's what's worked for 80% of other clients. And if they quit, cool. I got them to pay. I made a little bit of profit, whatever, we're good. That's the agency's mindset when it comes to these systems. So you realistically can't build a sustainable client acquisition system with a service that is not a partner in your business. So that's where we go into coaches. Coaches and consulting programs and services, I think, are great options for every business, right? You have the ability to get experts for a relatively low cost. To hire an expert that builds this stuff for me, just the first party pixel server side tracking system, you're looking at $7,000 to $8,000. And that was me quoting hiring people to do it for us. Because of how big the problem was, I educated myself to do it myself because I knew it was necessary. To build a core VSL funnel, you could probably find somebody to build that for $1,000 to $3,000. You could even probably buy a template from an LTO funnel for $330 to $300 and implement it and do it yourself. But how do you actually connect all these pieces? And that's where coaching programs benefit. It gives you the ability to connect with those resources. However, from our research, and if you're watching this video, most of our clients, one, don't want to implement and do something that they're never going to do again. And that is really where Conversionly comes in. Our objective was taking our agency backgrounds, our coaching principles, and how do we marry the two to create a cost-effective solution that a customer can use and hire us for without having to spend the $30,000 to $40,000, $50,000 that it actually should cost to do something like this effectively, right? And that's where we created our service. If you look at Y Combinator, and that is one of my favorite businesses. Peter Thiel is one of the people I aspire and look up to. Those of you that don't know him, I highly recommend that you look into him. Peter Thiel is one of the founders of or advisors to some of the largest companies we know of, like Google, Facebook, Uber, etc. But he started Y Combinator as a launch pad for startup businesses. And when it came to building Conversionly and effectively building the right solution for our clients, I was asking myself, how do we create the same type of success and momentum that Peter Thiel is able to get through Y Combinator? If you look at it, his company has a high trajectory of success with startup founders to get them invested in, getting people to buy their services, getting their MVPs launched quickly. What's that process? And it really came down to Y Combinator's operating principles of, one, the founders and the founding team are working alongside the experts directly one-to-one. The experts are guiding their hands on exactly what you need to do, and they're providing done-for-you systems and things that they don't need to worry about, things like HR, things like billing. Like, they already figured out those problems. So there's no point in having the founders get distracted with those things. And our process is we do for you the things that you would only do one time. Building out the funnels, likely only going to do one time. We could set up the core and then you could duplicate and easily change things out. Doing your market research and your strategy, you're probably only going to do that one time. You're going to make slight variations and deviations from that in the future, but the core principles are going to remain pretty consistent. Building the first party tracking system, you're never going to do that more than once, and for good reason. From that aspect, we do for our clients the hard stuff of building, and then we operate just like Y Combinator, and where you take your expertise of your business, you take our expertise of client acquisition architects, you marry the two together to create a system that ultimately gives you the ability to propel yourself forward. You will consistently have to manage ads. You will consistently have to produce content. Those are things that you are going to have to do no matter what. But that is why our process is designed to help you succeed. So let's go ahead and jump in and look at our 4-phase process. Phase 1, this will not apply to businesses that are already running cold marketing offers. So if you're coming through this process, you've already been running a VSL or a webinar or something, and you've been having success, but your margins are just way too high, you would skip into phase 2, and we'll cover that in just a second. Those that don't have cold success, the first thing that we absolutely do with every single client is we do a problem and needs assessment. What problem does the market have that is actually desiring a solution, right? You can't go sell something that you want to sell because probability is most people don't want to buy it. If you want to sell something to a cold audience successfully, then you must have a problem that demands a solution. So the first place we start is rapidly validating your offer and the problems through a problem needs rapid fire testing to see what problem does the market demand a solution for. From there, we build around that. That goes into phase 2. This is where we build out your RBC squared strategy process. This is, what does the customer journey look like? What does your content need to be? Where are we posting that content at? What are the requirements for it? What is the unique mechanism that you're deploying, and how are we using that to apply to different aspects of the belief patterns and systems that people have? Some of the cool functions of our strategy process is we take all your case studies and testimonials and we build an authority and claims bank for every single objection that somebody will ever have. That's one of the focuses that allow us to then harness artificial intelligence to handle a lot of the heavy lifting for us, and we deploy those systems for you. Next, we build out the Infinity flywheel systems. This is all the implementation in those 6 core elements that I already talked about. Building out the retargeting engines in your audiences, setting up the custom events, building out the first party pixel, setting up the funnel, all the different things that need to happen to make that system work effectively and create that flywheel pattern. We build all of those things for you. Then we go into optimization. This is our flywheel optimization protocol, and there's 4 phases of optimization. Optimizing our traffic to make sure that we are getting the highest click-through rate at the lowest cost, maximizing the conversion through that step. Next, we maximize our conversion rate. How are we taking lead to appointment? Last, we optimize for quality, getting the highest quality people coming through the system. And fourth, the close. This is how do we maximize the close. If you are already closing high ticket, we're probably only going to have to tweak a couple things and you're going to be on your way. But if you have never closed cold traffic, you're going to need a considerable amount of help here. And that's why we optimize for that step. We help you build your sales script. We have an AI sales coach that will then allow you the ability to get feedback on your sales calls. You plug it into our AI sales coach. It grades out your call, what you did good, what you didn't do good, what you need to work on, and it creates an action item list for you to implement immediately. And it's trained on over 12,000 sales calls that we've analyzed and ran ourselves. Phase 4 is where we remove you from the management, okay? As you are scaling your business, the business owner themselves cannot be solely focused on all things sales and marketing, right? You're probably owning a couple pieces of it, but you're not managing and owning the whole process of it. One of the first things that we want to do is eliminate you from sales calls. 9 times out of 10, most business owners are not the best salespeople, okay? They're the best at understanding what it is that they do. But when it comes to understanding the nuances of people's objections and the facial expressions you need to make and having any PQ conducted within that sales process is actually probably hurting you to some degree. So as soon as we can, bringing in a commission-based sales rep is something that we're going to help you do. You will get our recruitment systems, you will get our ramp-up systems, and we will help coach you on recruiting a sales closer. Then an integrator that can take over how the system functions, the back end, the automations, all those aspects, get them ramped up. We have a ramp-up program, a recruitment program, and we have recruitment partners that you can get those resources for, and then you can use our team and our expertise to help ramp them up and get them suitable to be able to fulfill on those aspects for you. Lastly, you have scaling up traffic and system add-ons. So we can help you set up LTO funnels, webinar funnels, community funnels, things like that are just going to pour more traffic into the system once it is optimized. All right, so that breaks down the full process of how Conversionly helps our clients scale and create predictable revenue. If you are currently operating a linear marketing system, you are stuck in a trap and it is ultimately a death spiral. I know this because we went through this, we experienced it, and it cost me over $5 million to find the solution. If you want to have somebody implement this for you, or at least have a breakdown of strategically of what you need to do, then I highly recommend you speak with someone from our team. They will be able to help you diagnose your RBC squared process and what needs to happen in that transition from cold traffic to closed traffic, and how you reduce your sales cycle in the most effective and efficient means possible.